Welcome to the Dylan Experience. Today is episode 45, and I've got a special guest for you. But before we get to that, make sure you follow us on YouTube, check us out on Spotify, all the other podcast places, and keep in touch with us. Now, my next guest is a strong advocate for the transgender community who speaks on such notable platforms as TEDx around the country because she has made the transition herself from male to female on April 8th, 2016. She was selected in January 2017 by the LGBTQ Nation as one of the top 50 successful transgender Americans you need to know, and was also featured on the cover of November 2021's edition of the Platform magazine in recognition for her service work. I'm excited to share my guest today, Kendra Holmes. Karen, how are you?
Very good, very good. Thanks, Dylan, for having me on your show. Real quick, I do want to correct something. Actually, I transitioned October 1st of 2010, and I had the big surgery April 8th of 2016. So that means this Friday is another anniversary, my 6-year anniversary for the surgery.
How does that feel?
It feels great. I mean, once I transitioned back in 2010, I was like 150% happier. And not that I wasn't happy before as Tony, but it's just that much happier. And then after the big surgery, now 200% happier. So it's moving right along. The journey keeps on coming along, and we just want to give back to the community, pay it forward, and just being inspired by what I can do to help others that are either trapped and can't figure out what to do, or are upset because they did transition, but society's not treating them very well out there.
Absolutely. So I'm so curious about all of this. So I think I want you to just kind of tell your story, get the foundation out of the way, and then we can kind of dig into this, because I have so many questions in terms of like that feeling of being trapped. And you talk about this on your website, and I'm really curious about that. So why don't you tell us your story? Share your experience, kind of walk us through your life and what brought you here. And I'll probably ask questions throughout, if you don't mind.
Sure, not a problem. I mean, basically, that I can remember, I started dressing in women's clothes, starting with my mom's clothes at the age of 13. And that's why my title of my talk for the TEDx was 40 Years and Wandering No More, because it took me 40 years to figure this crap out. And the things that I did as Tony before I made the big change was being involved in sports. I played, football, I played baseball. My biggest one was playing baseball. If I had, played my cards right, I could have possibly be playing professional baseball. I don't know about now, because I'm 65 years old, so I'm retired a few years ago. But it just didn't work out. I think if I had a little more push by my dad, I probably could have been playing professional baseball. I actually had a scout from the New York, a friend of a friend who was a scout for the New York Mets. He was going to have him come see me play. And I ended up transferring schools and didn't tell anybody. So I think that's where I wish I had a little more pressure from my dad, to continue, because I thought I was really, really good. I played shortstop, and the day that the gentleman was going to have a scout see me, we actually had a double tournament that same day. One of the tournaments that we were in, which was in DC, that actually was a single elimination, and the one in Rockville, Maryland, was a double elimination. They both started at the same time for the first one, so we forfeited our first game in Rockville. And then as soon as we won the game in DC, 2-1, which I scored the winning run, we drove out to Rockville to play that one. And then I apparently hit the fence, but it fell down on the ground. And my coach at first went, "Oh," and I thought the guy caught the ball. And I'm like trotting around, Instead, I see the guy picking the ball up, and I'm like shooting down the second base real quick, which I could have probably had a triple instead of a double, or maybe an inside the park homer. And then after that game, we won 6-4. Of course, my hit was the scoring run for that game. And the guy came up and said, "Hey, I'm going to have a scout come see you play. And I'm like, great, so I was excited, but like I said, it just wasn't meant for me to do, I guess. And then, I played a lot of other softball games and stuff like that. Just getting involved with the community, because I started doing a lot of volunteer work first with cystic fibrosis. Everybody was kind of like wondering why I got involved with cystic fibrosis, because I didn't have any family member that had cystic fibrosis. It was just a fun thing to do, and I knew that I was getting involved in helping people that day. And after that, the first one was the walkathon, and then I started doing other things like the poop wagon, for the other walkers, and stair climbers, volleyball. All of this was with cystic fibrosis. So it was really interesting how that all played out. And I just got involved, still as Tony. I got involved with Prince George's County Park Police Volunteer Association. I was the president of that association 5 out of the 7 years I was with them. I took a little break because I said, let me let somebody else take over, and it kind of diminished just a little bit. And then I said, let me come back in and try to get it back up again, and I did. But then finally, right when I started to formulate to say, hey, I'm going to transition, I just went on and dropped out of the group. I wasn't sure how they were going to take it, as far as me being transgender, but I later talked to the chief of police, and he was okay. He knew about it. He was just waiting for me to come out about it, and I respect that a lot, because when I go around and teach to other transgender people or cisgender people, I tell them, if somebody comes up to you and asks you about somebody that might be transgender that they think, don't expose them. Let them go ask themselves, and it's up to that transgender person whether they really want to tell who they are. So that's the way I would leave a lot of the conversation. And so for years I just basically prayed to God, why do I keep dressing all the time? I mean, literally I would leave home in the morning to go to work, go to about a couple of blocks away from home, change into being Karen, drive to work. When I got nearby work, about a block away, I would change back to Tony, and after work, Karen, and then back home, change to Tony. So that went back and forth for quite a while. My first wife, she knew I, dressed and stuff like that. So that was, she was very, I should say, okay with it. But when we started going to some of the clubs and stuff like that together, I was getting picked up more than she was. I don't know why, because she was beautiful too. And so then when I got married the second time, I didn't tell her right away. Eventually I told her I used to, but I was still dressing. And that went on for like 18 years of our marriage. I just didn't want to break up what I felt like was a happy home, the kids and everything. And that eventually, she just, I'm not really positive why she broke up with me for sure, because we never really discussed it. And then she ended up going back to her first husband, which is kind of weird after being away for 19 years to all of a sudden go back and get married to him again. So it went pretty good. And I was kind of glad. I was actually going to get married for a third time. I was doing the Sleepless in Seattle thing, where I lived here in Maryland and she lived in Seattle. And we did that back and forth for a couple of years. After the first year, she called off the wedding. And about a month later, she wanted to get back together. And so we did. And I felt like, it was like a crash and burn for me on the first one. I mean, when we first got together. And the second, when we got back together, I said, I'm not giving my heart 100%. I'm going to reserve 10% of that. And so when she called it off the second time, I was okay, because I didn't give her 100% of my heart. And so later, I think it was a lot going on for her, because later she just basically said, she called me up said she was going to have a blended family soon. And I was trying to figure that one out. So when she told me she was going to get married, I'm like, wow, it hadn't even been a year yet that we broke up, and she's getting married. But she didn't know about my dressing. That was the one thing I kept very, very private from her. The good question I always ask myself is, would that have continued on into our marriage, or was I going to not? And so I'm kind of glad it all worked out the way it did, because once she broke it off for the second time, I was like, I'm just going to dress all the time. Still not knowing I really was transgender. At least I didn't know the terms back then, because I only thought I was a cross-dresser at that time. And I went to a conference up in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference. I'm not sure if you've heard about that, but
I read it on your website. So I'm kind of updated with this story, but please, by all means, keep going.
Okay. And so in going to that conference, I thought I was just going to go get dressed for the weekend and have a good time, and stuff like that. And then when I got there with a friend of mine who told me about the conference, I saw these little kids running around 5, 6, and 7 years old. And I'm like, wow. And they're happy and their parents are supporting them. And I was like really shocked. And so I also looked through the guidebook and said, I want to go to that workshop, this workshop. And to hear the stories that I heard, I'm like, wow, they're just like me, And one thing I like to clarify, because I tell people that being transgender, and the statistics are off. I know it's much higher than this now, but the one that I've gotten used to talking about is there's about 1.4 million transgender Americans in the country. And so I always refer that to, even though my story might be very, very close to somebody else's, it's like DNA. We are going to have a little bit of difference in that area there, as far as my story with somebody else's story. So it was really good to hear the stories that I heard there. And I'm like, when I left that conference, I was like fired up, gun ho. I wanted to transition on the job, everything. And so talking with a very, very good friend of mine, Andrea, who's an attorney at our agency. Matter of fact, I still work at the same agency. She said she would talk to the director of civil rights and inclusiveness for me, and not giving my name, and just see what options I had or what could be done. And she was in tears when she told the story to the director. So I said, okay, I'll meet with her. I told her basically the same story, and I got the same results. She was in tears. She said, look, I'm going to go ahead and talk to the CEO of the agency and see what we need to do to have you transition on the job. And when she did, she came back, and the CEO said, do whatever it takes to make this work, and that, I'll be able to transition. Okay. And I was like, wow. But they said they wanted to do one thing. They wanted to put it on hold for like 3 months so they could work up a good plan for me to transition on the job. So they said, don't tell anybody, because we want to tell everybody the same day, the same time across the country, because our agency is one that's across the country. And we have an office. Well, we had an office. Now we're down to, instead of 57, 47 state offices, we're now down to 8 regional offices. But everybody across the country here were told the same day, same time that I was going to transition. They then had a staff meeting individually with their directors, reading a letter from me to them about my transition. And it was weird. And then they had the next day, they had everybody come in to a conference room to talk about my transition and what they expected, how they wanted me to be treated and everything. And it went really, really good. The only issue that came up, really the only issue that came up, was about the bathroom, and stuff, and how I would use the bathrooms and stuff like that. And my job really prepared it for it. The fact that they converted the ladies' bathroom that had 2 stalls into a single-use bathroom. You could lock the door behind you. And the men's bathroom had 1 stall and 1 urinal, and they converted that with a lock on it as well. So anybody could use either one. And so what I did, because that bathroom was right outside my door. So why go to the other side of the building, to use the bigger bathrooms? They didn't change those. And I felt like, I wanted to give the women a little bit of modesty because I just transitioned. And, but if I had to go, I could use it. There was no issue there, but I just like, why go past 2 bathrooms to get to the big one? And so I just did it that way. And it was the funny part about it when they were all called into this big meeting in the conference room about me. They all thought they were getting fired. They thought that, that was what it was all about. And little did they know it was about me, and my transition. And they knew I was going to be off. They showed a picture of me and stuff like that, what I was looked like. And actually, that picture they showed everybody else, I actually used that for my government ID, and stuff like that, which was cool because the security guy goes, "Well, you ready to take your picture?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Or do you want to use this picture?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're going to use that one there." And so we're like, it's taken in the park. My head's cocked a little bit, so, and people are like, "How'd you get a picture like that?" I said, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." And it just was real sharp to be able to feel that way. I went to my desk, I had cards on my desk, gifts on my desk. Email system was already changed when I took off for those 2 weeks. And what I did, which was interesting to a lot of people, was I took my time coming into work wearing a dress. So for probably a good month, I just came in a nice pair of slacks and a blouse. And I didn't want to do it like in your face, here I am wearing a dress, and I thought about it very, very carefully, how I wanted to do this to come out to everybody. Because first of all, I was the safety officer for the agency. So I had to walk around. So I felt like, here I'm at a parade, and stuff like that. I couldn't go somewhere and just hide, for the day or for however long I wanted to. And a lot of the females, co-workers, they would stop me in the hall, congratulate me and say, "Hey, look," when they had an office, they said, "If you need to get away, need some time to yourself, you're more than welcome to come to my office and just shut the door and just chill." And I'm like, "No, I'll be okay. It's not going to be that bad." And so that's what we did. I'll let you
I have
a lot more.
So I have so many questions, just because you make this process sound way easier than I think it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're not the first person I've met with this situation. And I know for a fact there's hard parts to it. And I'm really curious about that. You speak in your website, and it's interesting. Like the way you speak on your website and way you speak here, it's flip-flopped, right? You talk about Tony here, you talk about Karen there, because you're
Right.
telling the story. And I'm really curious, like, how do you feel like that was like there's 2 identities within you, or do you feel like there's one that has been suppressed so long that you just use Tony as the cover, right?
Well,
Like, what is that? Oh, go ahead.
it's interesting that you say that, because when I first auditioned for my TED Talk, I mostly talked about Karen, and the coach that I had said, "Look, I want you to talk about Tony and then bring in to Karen." And I was really, really afraid of doing that because of the pronoun switch back and forth. And I was really nervous about, and it actually, I had like, let's see, 2 coaches, one at first, and then I met for 8 other coaches at one time. Then after that one, they gave me a new coach who changed everything. And then he said, "Look, I got you the 95% ready." He says, "But I'm going to switch you over to somebody else who's going to get you at 115. I'm like, whew. So, but she didn't change anything. She just this is the last coach. She just said, "Look, I want you to be a little bit more personable about Tony." And it was like, okay. And this coach that sent me to her, he said, "I can't believe it. You're the first person I've ever had change their talk the night before and you did it perfect the next night, when we did it on Skype. And so I was happy about it. I mean, trust me, changing pronouns from myself to talk about Tony, it was all I kept thinking was, I'm going to screw up and say the wrong pronoun. And it was perfect. And obviously you saw the TED Talk. So what'd you think?
Well, I didn't actually get to see the TED Talk.
Oh,
That was one thing. I was able to read through your website, but I didn't get a chance to see that. But it's just so, it's funny, like you talk about screwing up the pronouns, and there's such a huge debate about like whether to use pronouns, whether to not to use pronouns. And I feel like just by the way you talk, like you're very, you're very open to understanding that people aren't going to get it right, and it seems like, just by how you talked about the dress, like you're not trying to do this for anybody else's approval. And I feel like that's a very healthy way to go about this, of like, there's certainly, this is a controversial topic, right? Like still today, which is still remarkable to me, that we can't just look at someone and say, who do you want to be? Right. It's not, I think people talk about this and say, if you can go from male to female, well, I can go from male to polar bear. It's like, it's not like that, right? It's not that, it's not that ridiculous. There's certainly something within you that said, this isn't me at a young age. And it's curious, right? Like it's a curious thing to try and understand that. It's a difficult thing to be suppressed, right? And in many ways oppressed by how other people force you to fit into the box to make them comfortable. And I'm curious.
How it was today for this one girl that came up to me after I spoke today at University of Maryland. She was literally in tears because she doesn't want to be in this box that everybody else wants her to be in. She wants to be free. Mm-hmm. So she's obviously got my card, and I told her, look, I want you to call me and we'll talk, and I wanted her to feel comfortable of what the choice that she decides to make. Because I tell you, when I made my choice leaving that conference, I was like a runaway freight train coming home down 95 and saying, I got to change at work.
So where was the resistance for you? What were the hardest parts of this for you to step into and try and, where did you get pushback? Where did you push back yourself? Like what were the hard parts for you?
To be honest about it, it was about the fact that even when I was Tony, I was an altar boy at a Catholic church school and everything. And I was fighting with that concept that, do I transition? Is this against God's will and stuff like that? And like I said, I had prayed for years about it. And God answers us in 3 ways. Yes, no, and maybe. Just hold on a little bit. I'm working on something for you. And you know what? Every time I've put my trust and feelings like that into God, he's led me down a path that a lot of trans people just don't have that opportunity. Like you said, it seemed like it was easy for me, and I feel like it was, but it was only because I had a higher source behind me the whole time. I mean, to be able to get your name changed in a couple of months, a lot of people don't get that happening to you. I asked even when I went to the courts to not put my name in the newspaper for my own safety, because they want to put that in the newspaper because they want to see if there's any judgments against you. And the sheriff's department did it, paying them a little bit more. Doing my Social Security card, which I kind of went the opposite way, but I went to one place and they didn't know anything about doing anything. I go to another Social Security place. While standing in line, the lady there didn't know anything about it, but another lady overheard the conversation and came over and said, I know all about it. Come on over here. Took care of my Social Security card. I went to DMV up in Glen Burnie, and I could have had my driver's license changed that day going up there, but I missed the lady by a couple of minutes or so because It was Thanksgiving weekend,
Mhm.
and I got my driver's license changed within a week. Nobody usually goes through like that
Yeah.
possibility. And then the biggest one, which was really funny, is I wanted to get my new passport. And in doing so, I sent my application in, and I get a letter back from passport saying I needed to pay $25 more, that because of the process of doing my name change and the gender marker change, I needed to pay $25 more. So I said, I'll take care of that. And all of a sudden I'm at work, and I always leave my cell phone at my desk. And that day I decided to bring it with me. A number pops up on the phone that I didn't recognize, but I said, well, let me go ahead and answer it. This is John Doe from the passport place. I've got your application sitting on my desk in my file thing. Are you going to do anything to do your updated passport? I'm like looking at the phone like, they're calling me, to change my passport. And so I said, yeah, my doctor has my information, and I'm going to call her to find out where it's at, because she needed to send me a letter to get it changed. After I hung up with him, I called my doctor's office. They said, hey, she just had a cancellation. She's going to work on your letter at 1:00, and then we'll send it off tonight or definitely in the morning. I'm like, talk about still things going perfect and right for me. And I ended up getting my new passport in 2 weeks. Unheard of, that you get it that quick. So I've had some really interesting process that I think worked in my favor even more so.
Yeah.
And I just, I just totally believe that, everything's done for a reason, or the timing is perfect. And I always tell, it was funny, I was telling people that tonight again, when I was talking, I said, look, I think if God allowed me to have my transition earlier at the age of, 18 or 19, I probably, to be honest, I would have been this wild child out there,
Yeah.
dressing real short dresses and all this kind of stuff. And I think it worked out perfect. The timing is, he knew.
I think it's interesting of how you talk about God, because I don't think that's, and you tell me, I don't feel like that's a very common support structure available for transgender, right? For that transition. I feel like God, or not necessarily God, but religions in general, very much stand in opposition to the transition itself. And so, like, how do you in some ways help other people that are going through the same process kind of deal with that, right? Like almost that religious trauma or that religious abuse. Like how do you help people find that relationship, or how do you help people deal with that difficulty?
I mean, to be honest, a lot of trans people want to be fed by the church, but because of the way society at the church treats trans people, then that shoves them away. It does, like, we don't want you here in our church.
Mm-hmm.
One of the churches that I go to now, it's the second church I go to. My first church that I go to, they're totally supportive. And I'll tell you even more so why they're totally supportive. And then this other one, I've actually had a chat with the senior pastor, and he heard about, the fact that I was transgender, and also went on my website, and we've had a talk, and he knows where I come from. And it's like, that's who we are in our mind, heart, and spirit. It has nothing to do with sexuality and stuff. We just know 5, 6, and 7-year-old kid doesn't know anything about sexuality. All they know is I'm a boy, I'm a girl, and so but he believes in what he believes in within the Bible. I believe, hey, if it wasn't meant for me to be having everything work the way it's supposed to work, God would have put a roadblock along the way. Here's the interesting part. After I transition, a lot of transgender people will go ahead and have surgery a year after they transition. When I transitioned, I really wanted to do that too, but I felt God placed it on my heart to wait 5 years. That was pretty tough for me to handle, waiting 5 years. But I kind of knew part of the reason was I wanted to take another loan out of my thrift saving plan to pay for the surgery, which I found out after my surgery was $45,000. I told, I said, I'll wait 5 years, either take another loan out of my thrift saving plan, or if I hit the lottery. My surgery, they said, was $45,000. My co-payment for the surgery was $450. Technically, I hit the lottery. So, and when President Obama allowed the federal government trans people to have the surgery through their insurance company, that's why, and it happened that year, my 5th year almost. And that was cool. So, like I said, here's my belief. It worked out perfect. And when I was at a couple of other churches, I was always every Sunday videotaping live on Facebook the service. I would have anywhere from 60 to 110 people that were in the community watching the service. So yes, we want to be, served. We want to be fed, but because of the way people are at the church, that's what's happening. My church, because I actually have been doing ride-alongs until COVID hit, to talk to the sex workers that are out on Eastern Avenue in Fairmont Heights, Maryland. And in doing so, because 2 of the girls in that area that were sex workers were murdered in 2019, the 3rd District Commander said, look, I'm tired of having my officers push the girls over to the DC side of the street. DC comes by, pushes them back to Maryland. And she says, I don't want to play ping pong with the girls anymore. And if I arrest them, they'll come back out. Is there anything you would like to do to try to help? And I said, absolutely. Let me take a shot at it. I'll ride around with the officers and stuff like that. And when we see them, I'll get out of the cruiser, go up and talk to them. I had to let them know, hey, my name's Kendra Holmes, and I'm not here as a police officer. I don't even work for the police department. I'm here to ask you, is there anything we can do to help you get off the streets? And that's what I did every 2 weeks, over and over and over. And I met up to about maybe 18 girls out there. One was so, I guess, accepting of me is the fact that I got this phone call one day while I was on Metro, and it said Howard University Hospital. I'm like, who's calling me from Howard? So I answered the phone while I'm on the train and I could barely hear. And the girl told me that she wants to get off the street right away. She said, I'm tired, I've been raped, I need help. And so I said, can you call me back in 30 minutes because I'm on the train, I can barely hear you. I didn't get a phone call and I didn't know, and since she called from Howard, I couldn't call her back. I talked to the sergeant who was in charge of that detail of patrolling, having her officers patrol up and down Eastern Avenue. I said, look, I got a phone call from one of the girls and she said she was just raped. And I think that's why she's at Howard University Hospital. Is there any way I can go out and ride tomorrow? Which just happened to be Friday, because that's usually when I rode, was Friday or Saturday night out there with the officers. And she said, absolutely, you can go. And we looked around, but I didn't find her. So I'm really anxious to get back out there and see if I can get the rapport back together. The interesting part, in 2020, I was asked to speak at a reef laying in Fairmont Heights for the 2 girls that were murdered. And when I was there was a couple of employees from the Greenbelt Library who later told me they were so inspired by my talk and what I wanted to do as far as help these girls, because I started a coalition called the Prince George's County Trans Coalition in Prince George's County because of the 2 girls that were murdered. And she said, we were so pumped up of what you said, which is, let's teach these girls how to do resume building. Let's teach them how to role play across the table of a job interview. And the other part is I want to help them dress for success. she said, we want to help, but we want to expand it even further, going through the library system. And I said, and they came up with the project called the Butterfly Project, based off of my logo of the butterfly. And what they want to do is also teach the girls how to operate a computer. We want to do mentoring with them, get them in touch with a girl that's somebody that's transgender that can also mentor them. We want to be able to have luncheons once a month, so that way they can meet their mentors and keep following up. And we'll do that for like 6 months. And so here again, COVID kind of messed that up, but we're still in meeting together and stuff. We're actually having the first luncheon next week on April 15th. So we're hoping that we'll get some girls to show up and stuff like that, to be able to just say, hey, this program is here for you. I'm so excited about it because of the fact that everybody I've told about the Butterfly Project and what we're looking to do, they're like saying, hey, I want to help. I want to help do resume building. I want to help role play. I want to help with clothes. I've already gotten clothes. I've got a boutique with brand new clothes and used clothes that are going to just give the clothes to the girls. And so going through the library system is what we want to do, because that'll tell people, hey, it's a safe place and everything else. This project, I want to take it national. After we finish, I want to do it in baby steps, take care of Prince George's County, go to DC, Virginia. The Butterfly Project is, at first it got started being pumped up, basically, well, shall we say, from the sex workers, transgender sex workers, mostly the women, because that's mostly who we've seen. I've only seen one trans man out there. What's going to happen with the Butterfly Project? It's going to do two things. And we're not just looking to only help the sex workers, even though they're the ones that, are out there. And actually one sex workers that I talked to when we stopped, she actually told me she knew Excel, Word Perfect. And I'm saying to myself, and you're out here on the street, but you know what? That's what happens a lot of times when we transition. We end up losing our job. It's not guaranteed that we're going to end up having our job once we transition.
Yeah.
The process of going through what we're going through out there it does two things. That one, I want to see that the girls can get a job. When they get a job, hopefully they'll get benefits with it, such as healthcare and all that other kind of good stuff. Because to see them getting it off the internet is not good. Yeah. See a doctor regularly, to put them on, because when I transitioned and I got on hormones and stuff like that, I went to my doctor because of the fact I have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. Somebody needs to look out for me, in that in that concept, to figure out, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, not get drugs off of the internet and stuff like that. The other component of trying to help these girls through the Butterfly Project is, one, it's going to help the community. The community doesn't have to go out there and look out in their yard and see condoms all over the place because of the fact somebody was out there having sex in the neighborhood or in their car or whatever the case may be. And so we're getting people from the community helping out with this project. It's not just trans people, although I look at, and I always, when I go talk to the trans community, I always put it out to them, look, I'm charging you with the fact that, look, I want you to be able to take charge and be like the veteran trans person, not veteran as far as military, but as in the community, because you've been out there for a while, whether it's for a year or more. I want to know that you can take hand of another young trans person and bring them along, teach them, hopefully, street life, being trans. Watch yourself that you don't get murdered out there or assaulted because of the fact, like some of the girls have said, when they meet a guy, it's like, oh, they'll find out eventually that I'm trans. And I'm like, no, I don't want to see your name on Transgender Day of Remembrance, reading your name off. And by the way, Transgender Day of Remembrance is every November 20th around the world. So you find communities that will honor and memory of these trans people that have been murdered throughout the year. And so for me personally, I tell them, I say, look, I'd rather tell a guy up front that I'm transgender before he decides to buy me dinner for $75 to $150. And then all of a sudden he finds out that I'm transgender and ends up murdering me. I don't want that to happen to myself, let alone, you out there. So try to be upfront before it gets to be intimate with them. But like I said, I go one step further. It's just, hey, you take me out to dinner, I'm telling you before that happens, and so on.
That's so interesting. How do you deal with kind of the backlash of that, of dating, right? Like, of not just for yourself, but how do you help people outside of just that situation? But there's certainly backlash that comes from that. It's not I can't imagine it's an uncommon thing to have good experiences. I'm sorry, other way around, bad experiences when you tell someone, yeah, I'm trans. Like, what do you do? How do you, like, there's no guidebook for that. How do you deal with that?
Right. Well, the oddest question that's always asked to me a lot of times is, you transition to be a woman, but yet you still like to be with women. And I go, yeah, because who we are is in our mind, heart, and spirit. It's got nothing to do with sexuality. And being transgender is who we are, and this is how we go to bed. And we go to bed this way. Being gay or lesbian or bisexual is who you go to bed with. So that's the difference. And here again, I go back to the fact that being 5, 6, 7 years old, those kids don't know anything about sexuality. So that's one thing. I know when I could say, even though I'm still very much interested in women and I'm still single, because I actually put myself on hold for 5 years right after I transitioned, because this is something new. I needed to find out and know me before I decided to get involved with somebody else. And now that I'm ready, I haven't been able to find anybody just yet,
Yeah.
But I have dated, went out with a couple of guys, and I actually went on a dating site called Black People Meet. And I said, let me just go out there and see, kind of like dabble in the water a little bit, see what's going to come up. So I actually said I was interested in men. And so out of maybe, and I'm going to give rough numbers, but it is up in this area of people that responded, 150 guys said they wanted to date me. Out of the 150, I was able to eliminate a good 25 of them because I just didn't think they were all that hot looking. And then from there, I told the others that I was transgender, and they're seeing my pictures and everything when they hit me up on Black People Meet. And out of the 125, another 25 decided not to, because they said, hey, you look beautiful, but I'm just not into that. And I said, no problem, they're gone. So the other 100, they still wanted to date me. And here, I don't know if that was a fetish type of thing or whatever, and I wasn't going to find out. There's a couple people that I've actually thought about, but I know them really well. And one of them actually went to my church before they closed down. He had to back to Seattle. He went there for work, but every time he comes in town, he calls me up and goes, hey, you want to go out to dinner or go see a movie or something? I'm like, absolutely, because in a heartbeat, I probably would say, yeah, I'll date you, but my heart is still with women.
Sure. And I can't imagine, just, I know a few gay and lesbian friends of mine. It's not easy, right? It's just not it's not like you think about just regular dating. Like I'm a man, I have a wife, but just dating for me was hard enough, right? Like it's a difficult task to find someone of the same caliber as you, of like trying to find that connection and that person that kind of fits you.
Right.
And that's on a, an almost even number that's quite large, right? Like if you have 8 million people or 8 billion people on the planet, right? It's relatively 3.5 to 4 billion people are going to be relative options for dating. But when you get to transgender, when you get to gay, lesbian, bisexual, it's a very different kind of dating atmosphere, I would imagine. So
Yeah.
I would imagine it's smaller and more, and what that only makes it more difficult to find someone that kind of fits you and works with you. And how do you kind of work around that on an emotional level of it has to be incredibly lonely at times. Like, how do you deal with that?
It is very lonely. And I've actually had two guys that I really would have considered here locally. But they're, I'm 65 years old. And
You don't look at you. I'll be honest with you. You do not look at.
Thanks. But I'm sure these guys thought the same thing because they're like 40 years old. And the other one, I think, is like 45. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be called a cougar. And Rick, I know you're gonna probably see this, so I just want you to know that you're a great guy, but I'm having a brain fart here that I'm not gonna be doing right by dating a guy as young as you are. But anyway,
I've never had anybody turn someone down on my podcast before. I don't think it's that big of a podcast that Rick might see it, but
it's possible, but yeah, it's like I really want to find somebody because I feel like I've got a lot of in me to share with somebody. There's a friend of mine who I met. She's from Puerto Rico. I'm actually going to try to go out there this summer, but she has the same thought and idea. She's older than me. She's like 71, I think she told me, but still dateable. And she said the same thing I said when I last saw her about 2 weeks ago, before she left back for Puerto Rico. She says, I just want to be able to, sit on the couch with my, significant other to hold hands and watch a movie or TV, something. Yeah. I'm like, I feel the exact same way. And it gets lonely that way when you don't have somebody like that to do. Yeah, it's tough.
Do you think that is oh God, I had a good question, I think. Now I forgot it. Do you think that's more or less a problem that will be kind of ironed out as the transgender idea becomes more understood?
I think so. If people understand who we are, and I talk about this all the time, we're not what you see on Jerry Springer show.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got police officers, firefighters, military, doctors, nurses, judges, lawyers, you name it, they're out there, and we're doing great things out there. But people are fed the wrong information about who we are, and it's just like people are afraid. And possibly for me, as far as dating, I don't want to get on dating sites. I'd rather meet somebody traditionally, like, hey, go to a bar. Hey, you want a drink? Yeah, okay. And then it just goes from there, but it hasn't happened. And I think, when I go out and talk, they get a better flavor of who we are. And even the police, when I'm riding along with them and we have that downtown when I don't see any new trans sex workers coming out there, I get to talk to them and get them to change their thoughts or theory about who we are. The biggest thing with the police is they're riding up and down Eastern Avenue and they see these girls out there. These girls are out there not because they want to be out there. They want to be out there because they need food on their table. They need a place to lay their head at night. And I call this survival sex. It's not for pleasure. They need to be able to survive out there. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate. And certainly I'm glad you're out there helping. That's incredibly important. Now
Thanks.
I think I have one more question, and quite simply, God, I'm losing my questions today. What do you think are some myths that you could dispel in terms of the transition, being transgender, anything? What do you think are the biggest things that you kind of come up against, or transgender people, or even just regular people just have a myth about, that just isn't true in terms of transgender?
Well, like I pointed out about the analogy of comparing us to what they see on Jerry Springer show. I mean, I get disgusted when I see that. I'm like, come on, really? I'm glad it's off the air now, at least in this area. But the thing is, we're not like that. And it's like, I always also use this logic, because what you don't know, that hurts you.
Mhm.
So it's like an explosion that might have been done at this certain building. And then you've got this expert that comes on from a university and says, well, you know what, if they only had did this, there would have been a lot more casualties. If they did it at this time, it would have done a lot more worse. And I'm like, okay, apparently they didn't know that at first, but now that you're an expert at this university, somebody's listening, so, oh, maybe next time I'll do it at this time or at this place instead, or place the explosive at this location. Well, they did the same thing with the trans community when it came out, and mostly it really blew up when Caitlyn Jenner came out. Was really popular then. That people were making comments about, oh, men are going to start dressing up as women, going in there raping or abusing women or girls in the bathroom. That has not happened in this country at all. Across the country, no trans person has ever done that to anybody out there. Now you're just giving an idea to some pedophile out there that says, oh, I'm going to go dress as a woman now and go out there and do all these things. Well, technically speaking, a pedophile is a pedophile. They're not going to dress up as women. They're just going to go ahead and do it like they do. Yeah. So, but still, they did give that idea to some idiot out there who's going to try that instead of just, understanding, that that's not going to happen. Yeah. So they're all worried now that if we go into the bathroom, that's going to be a problem. We go to the bathroom just to go like everybody else. Women tend to go into the bathroom, they'll do the same thing, but they may freshen up a little bit, lipstick or blush or whatever the case may be. That's the same thing you're going to see with a trans person. They're just doing the exact same thing. And then they're out of the bathroom and they're gone. There's not going to be sitting around in the bathroom scoping out women or girls in the bathroom and stuff like that. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it takes an interesting turn when that's the kind of direction that people see this whole situation as, and it's never really made sense to me.
I just wanted to say, like, my life inspiration is not to have more, but to be more. So I want to really be out there doing whatever I can to make it a safer place, one that people understand. And then my other big thing that I always believe in, for the people out there who's thinking about transitioning, or anything in life, it doesn't have to be just that. It could be anything. If you believe in something, you may get it. But if you believe in yourself, you will get it. And I felt like that was for me when that time came and I started believing in myself. That's when I said, I'm going to transition now. And so it's been great.
Well, that's awesome. It's incredible to hear. And I'm glad you've been able to come on here and, build the platform that you've built, and to speak on TEDx is incredible. To speak at the universities and the places that you've spoken is always incredible.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, which is interesting. And when you use that word platform, it just took me back to I think it was 2015. I was in the same magazine that I was on the cover of, the Platform magazine. I was among 31 other women from around the world for being a up and coming inspiring females with a platform. In that magazine, I was the only transgender woman in that magazine. So it's like that to me told the editor and CEO of that magazine that, you know, it's worth being in their magazine. And now I'm on their cover. So that's great.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Well, Karen, I've got to ask you the last and final question. And you've probably said plenty that would suffice, but now you've got to come up with something new.
Thanks.
So the question is, if there was one message you could leave the world, what would it be?
That would be this, and I live by it each and every day when I'm out there talking or whatever. Do it because it's in your heart, not because you want something in return.
That's more profound than I think some people might give it credit for. You really dig into that statement, there's a lot to it. And I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, Karen, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your stories and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom. And I can't wait to share this with people and have people hopefully look into you and connect with you. What's the best place for them to go?
They can go to my personal website, which is so great. I've got over 500,000 views on it so far. But you can go to my website, www.kkholmes.com, or you can send, if you want to ask a question, and any question is fine, just go send me an email at kkholmes@kkholmes.com, and I'll respond back. It'd be great, put something on the subject lines that lets me know that you really need to talk, ask a question about something. You can also, I do a weekly Facebook live show every Friday at 2 o'clock. And it's in regards to transgender issues, but I'm expanding it to really anything that somebody wants to come on the show and talk about. And it's called, and actually I'm getting my own show, which is going to be the Kendra Holmes show. And it's going to be shown up in New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Ohio, Kentucky, Arlington, Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia, Richmond, Florida, and North Carolina. So, Largo, Maryland as well. So
Not
we're
bad.
excited. Yeah, we're excited, but you know, I'm hoping things go well with that, so we can basically, you know, get the word out. And it's so funny that a lot of people say, hey, you've transitioned fully as a woman now after having the surgery and everything. Why do you still be friends with us? And I tell people, it's like, it's paying it forward. Just because I transitioned fully, I was in the same spot you were. And we were friends then, we're still friends now, and we'll always be friends. Just because I've gone to a different level, I'm not going to forget who you are or forget the rest of the community. I want to still be there in their corner, fighting every day for them.
It's awesome. Well, I will make sure all of those are linked in the description below, so you can find, anyone can find Karen. And again, Karen, thank you very much. And
Thank you, Dylan.
I appreciate you coming on, and I hope everyone catches me next time on the Dylan Experience.
And we hope to hear from you again soon.
Absolutely.